Hi there everyone, welcome back to my channel, Mismatched Trish. Today I want to do a monthly wrap-up video for the month of July. I had 9 books that I finished and 1 DNF. So to start with the ones that I finished, I'm just going to keep this simple, do a brief summary as well as my final rating for this book. The first one is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me by Mindy Kaling. This is a memoir by Mindy Kaling. She was an actor and writer on the TV show The Office, the American version. And this is just some writings that she did about how she got involved in acting and writing, and just a little bit about her life. And I found this really good. I gave it a 5-star rating because it was just really funny and really informative. I enjoyed the book a lot. The next thing was The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. This was about a woman whose husband goes missing right after his company gets in trouble for fraud. 2.75. The idea was interesting, but I didn't feel that connected to the characters, and the ending was very unsatisfying. The next one was The 6 Women of Salem by Marilyn K. Roach. I gave this one a 3.5. It was really interesting. I forgot to mention, this book was a nonfiction book that followed 6 women who were involved in the witch trials of Salem, Massachusetts during the 1600s. It picked out 6 women and just kind of followed them, starting with the earliest information that we have of them and then going through the remainder of their lives or their family's life as much as we have information. And of course, it was largely focused on what was going on in the trial, since that's what we have the most information on. So much information, it sometimes made it difficult to follow all of the characters, especially since some of them did have the same name, and it wasn't always easy to tell which one the author was referring to. There was also some parts in here that they drew from primary sources such as letters and court records, where it used non-standardized writing, which was a little bit hard to read. I would have preferred if they had, rewritten it in standard writing so that I could make sure I was understanding it correctly. The next one was called Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This one I feel like was another 3.5. The book was interesting. I liked the story, but it also had a murder mystery aspect in it that I didn't really enjoy. I felt like it distracted from the rest of the book. This book is about a girl named Kaya who lives in the marshes of South Carolina near a small town, and she lives on the outskirts, outside of the town, so she doesn't really know anyone in town very well. She goes in occasionally to buy groceries, and that's pretty much it. Other than that, the rest of her family leaves their home, and she is left to take care of herself up through adulthood. Eventually, he's found killed in the marshes, and murder is suspected, and Kaya, the main character, is the primary suspect. I really enjoyed the part that followed Kaya's life about her living and learning more about the marsh, but I just didn't feel like the murder mystery was well done. I can't talk too much about this one without spoilers, so if you'd like a more detailed review of this book that includes spoilers, please comment below, and I'll work on a longer video that talks about, more of my thoughts on this book. The next book I read was called The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This is about a woman who is frustrated with her life, so she tries to kill herself. But in the process, she finds herself in kind of the almost like an in-between between life and death, where she's given the option to choose from all these other different choices that she could have made in her life, each of which would have led to a different outcome. And she gets the opportunity to see what her life would have been like in all these different situations. And if she wants, she can choose to continue living one of those lives. I gave this one a 2.5. The concept was interesting, but I found the way that it was carried out sort of cliche. The whole theme of the book felt overdone, and I sort of figured out how it was going to end, and I just wasn't all that intrigued by it. The next book I read was called Cleopatra, A Life by Stacy Schiff. This was one that I listened to on Audible. It's a nonfiction about the life of Cleopatra. This one I give a 4 stars rating because it was really interesting. It covered pretty much all of Cleopatra's life and talked about some of the different resources that we have about what she lived. So why do we know about, why do we know what we know about her life? Which I like that it went so much deeper than just what we've always thought or what we've always believed about Cleopatra, because it covered some of the myths and misconceptions of her as well as some more likely explanations for some of these things. As a historical book or a nonfiction book, it is a little difficult to follow on Audible because you sort of get confused about who we're following or what order things are happening. When I read a book, I sometimes want to be able to flip back and forth to check out, what year it is or what character is connected to who, and you can't do that easily with Audible. The next book I read was The Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz. This was a historical account of the Indigenous American culture of people who have lived in the United States and on the rest of North America, including a little bit of information about Central America people as well. This was a really interesting book. I gave it 5 stars because I found the information in it really valuable, and it was laid out in a way that was clear and concise and easy to follow. The book was very engaging. I wanted to know more about the topic, and even now I want to read more books that cover similar topics. The next book I read was The Maidens by Michaelides. This was a thriller about a woman whose niece calls her and tells her that one of her friends at Cambridge has been murdered. And the woman goes there to investigate. And she suspects one of the professors of killing the student. This professor had a group of young women whom he called the Maidens, based on a story from classical Greek mythology, which is what his subject is in. This book I didn't really enjoy. I gave it a 2 stars because it operated on a lot of twists, but twists that I didn't feel like worked really well. This is another one that I feel like I can't get into too much detail in without doing spoilers. So if you'd like to see a more detailed review of this book that involves spoilers, again, comment below and let me know, and I can work on that. Anyways, the mystery, it starts out, even in the summary, it tells you who the main character thinks is the murderer. So throughout this whole book, you kind of know that it can't be him. You know that there's going to be a twist. But it's a little bit frustrating because it's so much focused on this professor, even though you've kind of already realized that he's not the one who's doing it. So why aren't we following a different set of clues? It also involves a lot of red herrings, which can be interesting in a murder mystery. But in this one, I just found the red herrings were overdone. It kept trying to steer you off in different directions, but you knew that they weren't the right direction. So already you kind of knew not to take this information seriously. And then the plot twist at the end, I didn't really feel like they set it up for that. It just came out of nowhere and not in a good way. It didn't do what I think a good plot twist should be, which is once you find out the solution, you realize you should have figured it out all along. Like it was leading you towards that without you realizing it. And at this one, you didn't see it coming because they didn't give you any of the information that would suggest it. The plot twist just did not make sense to me. The next book that I read was called While Justice Sleeps by Stacy Abrams. This was a political thriller about a woman who works as a clerk for one of the Supreme Justice for one of the judges on the Supreme Justice. He goes into a coma, and she is left has his power of attorney. She is the one who's supposed to make all these decisions about, end of life decisions and things like that right before a huge court case that he was supposed to see. And they're trying to figure out, since he's not dead, how do we decide the court case? And she's got to try to figure out what did he want to decide on this, because he's kind of like the deciding vote on it. This one I gave a 3 stars. It was an interesting concept, but I was kind of hoping for something a little bit heavier on the politics, a little less on the thriller. And throughout the story, I found some of the plot twists and some of the things that happened just a little bit too ridiculous to be believable. At a certain point, some of the way that the plot was progressing felt a little bit too out there, so that I had trouble really getting into it, because it just was too much. For example, one of the villains would just violently kill the opposition when and somehow managed to get away with it, and yet he never tried to kill the main character, even though he probably could have easily done it, and he obviously would have felt no remorse about it. But for the sake of the plot, he didn't kill her. At least that's how it felt. And this was a book that was told in third-person omniscient, so we kind of see what's going on in the thoughts of a lot of the other characters, including the villains in the story. So there's not a whole lot of mystery. You're left more wondering, how are they going to get there, as opposed to what's going to happen, or why is all this happening? Like, you know the ending, but the main character doesn't. So you're watching as she figures out what you already know, which just isn't all that interesting to me. The final book I wanted to talk about is one that I DNF'd, The Hour of the Witch by Chris Bohjalian. This is about a woman who lives in Boston, Massachusetts during the 1600s, and she wants a divorce from her abusive husband. So she takes him to court in order to divorce him, not knowing if it's going to be approved or not. And throughout the course of the trial, the people in the town suspect her of being a witch. So it kind of switches from a divorce trial to a witch trial. The reason that I DNF'd this one, or I didn't finish it, was because there were some topics in it, some sensitive topics, that I do not think that the author handled well, and it frustrated me to the point to where I just could not read this book anymore. I'm intrigued by it. I do still want to finish it and find out what happens, but I was just so frustrated with it that at the time I could not, and there were other books that I was more interested in reading than this one, and I was just annoyed with the author, to put it simply. So those are all the books that I read during the month of July, as well as my thoughts and ratings on them. If there's any ideas that you have for videos you'd like me to do, please post them in the comments. Please also comment if you'd like me to do more detailed videos about the 2 books, Where the Crawdads Sing and The Maidens, and I will work on those. Also, let me know what you're reading and what you think of it so far. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great day.